Welcome to Haunted Talks, the official podcast of The Haunted Walk, offering ghost tours and paranormal adventures in Kingston, Ottawa, and Toronto, Ontario. My name is Jim Dean. I am the creative director, and I really appreciate you joining us for today's show. Spectators watch as a masterfully controlled biplane gently wafts its way down towards the earth, preparing for a landing. Suddenly, one of the thin wooden struts of the little plane's right wing buckles and breaks. The spectators look on in horror as the plane crumples up like paper and comes crashing down. Its pilot, though dead, would fly yet again. This is the tale of Desmond Arthur and the ghost men of Montrose. But before we get to that, we do have tours running every night this summer in Kingston, Ottawa, and Toronto. And if you're going to be visiting those cities, or if you live there, we would love to see you out for a tour. Now, we have launched a brand new package in Ottawa that is a lot of fun, and that's what we're calling our Sound and Light combo. And that's because every year on Parliament Hill, they project this amazing digital display right on center block. And if you haven't seen it before, it's definitely something you need to check out. Extremely patriotic. I've had the opportunity to see it a few times, and I must say, as a proud Canadian, it does bring a tear to the eye. Now, what we have done is created a package with our original Haunted Walk of Ottawa. That's our all-outdoor tour that has perhaps the widest variety of our ghost stories about the city. Created a package where we have that tour earlier in the evening, so we have time to escort the group to Parliament Hill to watch the Sound and Light show. But the best part of this package is that we loan everyone a special cushion, which we are calling, of course, our Boo Tea cushions, to use during the Sound and Light show. And the grass on Parliament Hill can get a little damp from time to time, and it's often inconvenient to carry a blanket around. So these cushions, we loan them out to you so you can go watch Sound and Light show. We pick them up afterwards. They're pretty fun, and of course we love puns at the Haunted Walk. So why not combine two of Ottawa's biggest attractions, take the Haunted Walk earlier in the evening, and then we will lead you to Parliament Hill for the Sound and Light show with your own booty cushion. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. Information about all of our tours and paranormal adventures in Kingston, Ottawa, and Toronto can be found on our website, which is hauntedwalk.com. We also love to connect with you on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, all three at Haunted Walk. And if you're enjoying the episodes, be sure to subscribe and rate the show. Our story begins in early 1913 with the establishment of Britain's first fixed-wing military aerodrome at Montrose in eastern Scotland. Here, the first recruits to the newly founded Royal Air Corps would train and fly on the freshly introduced BE-2. The plane, reported to have particularly excellent aerial stability, made perfect sense for the purposes of training and observation. State-of-the-art in 1913, these 60-horsepower aircraft would be pressed into service during the First World War as frontline fighters, even though their trademark stability made them easy targets. Of course, until other fighters came into service, the British government vehemently defended its choice of fighter aircraft, even though its flight characteristics may have doomed many of its pilots. One of those early aviators, Lieutenant Desmond Arthur, was already a capable pilot, with multiple certifications under his belt. He was no novice when it came to aerial activities, and therefore no one had much to be worried about when he took to the sky in his trusty BE-2 on May 27, 1913. Almost his whole flight was uneventful, as he carefully maneuvered his flying machine through the air. However, as he began his descent from around 2,000 feet, something happened to the aircraft. the plane's supporting struts buckled and broke, causing the wings to collapse into the body of the plane, sending the whole craft plummeting down. Lieutenant Arthur was thrown from the cockpit and found dead a few hundred meters from the twisted wreckage of his plane. His death was unfortunate, but not surprising to the people of 1913. In fact, in the years leading up to the First World War, around 10% of all certified British pilots died in aviation accidents. The Royal Aero Club Committee performed the initial inquiry and blamed the crash on faulty maintenance. When the investigation wrapped up, it looked to be the sad end of the tragic tale. However, a second inquiry, possibly seeking to clear the manufacturer and the ground crew of any responsibility, ruled that in fact, Lieutenant Arthur had been flying dangerously and caused too much strain on the aircraft, precipitating the disaster. This inquiry was released in the summer of 1916 and was consistent in its denial of responsibility on the part of the government or the aircraft. This retroactive shifting of the blame occurred deep into the First World War, when the BE-2 was not performing well against German aircraft. This kind of politically motivated investigation would become a staple of the British government on crashes right up until the end of the Second World War. More than half of the 473 accidents just after the war were put down to pilot error, or even more obliquely, engine failure compounded by error of judgment. It was only in the months after the second inquiry that strange happenings began to occur at the Montrose Airfield. A major by the name of Foggins had the first experience. A rational, level-headed man, he saw another airman, this one in flying gear, heading for the mess ahead of him. When the mystery man reached the door, though, he did not open it. Instead, he simply disappeared. Foggins put it down to his imagination and decided not to risk his career by reporting what could be construed as a hallucination. When he saw the ghostly figure on a second occasion, he began to seriously consider telling someone, but ultimately did not have to make a decision as he overheard some of his comrades discussing their own sightings. It became clear to Major Foggins that this phenomenon was not just of his own imagination. Sightings continued through mid-1916, as a shadowy figure in aviator gear was seen by guards one dark night. Challenging the figure, they received no response. The guards, armed, and by this point quite afraid, shouted at the figure to identify itself. The figure kept coming. The stupefied sentries grew even more frightened, realizing shooting a ghost would be pointless. They fled their post, a grave crime for any soldier. However, when they explained their experience to their commanding officer, instead of facing the firing squad or some other serious punishment, the matter was just let go. In fact, the government recognized the situation, briefing all future servicemen at Montrose of the ghostly airmen. It was just too much for some, who requested to be reassigned and were quietly transferred to less eerie bases. To C.E. Gray, a friend of Lieutenant Arthur's and the editor of a weekly publication called The Aeroplane, the situation was clear. His old buddy was trying to defend his honor and communicate his displeasure at the second crash report. The ghost had initially been spotted around Barracks No. 2, where Desmond had lived, and the mess hall, where he had eaten. It was only thanks to C.E. Gray that the ghost's identity became clear, as he connected the location and timing of the sightings to the crash investigation and Desmond's life. Sightings of Lieutenant Arthur continued throughout 1916 as a new third investigation began. This one came without the same pressures as the second, as German air superiority had finally come to a close with the introduction of better British warplanes. This investigation overturned the second's findings, and instead came to the more likely conclusion that Desmond was not at fault for the loss of his plane. The final report drew effectively the same conclusions as the first, and placed the responsibility squarely on the aircraft and ground maintenance. Shortly after Christmas of that year, and not long after the report was published, Desmond's lonesome ghost was witnessed one last time, seemingly a final goodbye to his early airman friends and colleagues. For the underpowered and obsolete BE-2, 1917 was the beginning of the end, as the plane was withdrawn from frontline service, as more capable, less obsolete aircraft came into service. The last BE-2s in the British service were retired in 1917. Considering the timing of the airplane's frontline withdrawal, and the results of the third and final inquest, it is not difficult to suppose that the British government no longer had any reason to defend the clearly obsolete plane, and therefore had no reason to besmirch the dead pilot's honor. Many years later, early in the Second World War, an RAF pilot flying over Montrose in search of an enemy night bomber was suddenly shocked to see an old World War I era biplane appear ahead of him. He banked hard and dove to investigate, but by the time he had completed his turn, the biplane was gone. Was Desmond back in the air? In 1942, the Montrose Air Base was the scene of another tragic crash, as an airman's plane broke up on descent. The pilot had been seen arguing with mechanics shortly before takeoff, but his comrades knew him to be a very capable airman. Again, the official report blamed the pilot, and again, the airman returned to haunt the airstrip. Unfortunately, the record of this airman has been lost to history, but his influence has not, as he joined the ghost of Desmond Arthur in and around the airfield throughout the war, distinguished by his relatively more modern outfit and aircraft. Where Desmond had been first seen around his barracks, this second airman's ghost was often spotted near the hangar, the place where the erroneous repairs had doomed his plane. Was the ghost seeking retribution on the ground crew for the accident? Not only different in appearance, the second pilot is also known to be more aggravated than Lieutenant Arthur, and has been seen rifling through paperwork at the bedside of sleeping officers and even rushing from the morgue. It should be noted that in our research, we were not able to uncover this airman's name, which does seem a bit unusual, and perhaps throws some doubt on the credibility of the stories. However, as Montrose was an active training airfield, there were a number of accidents on its grass runway and in the general vicinity. Additionally, the airbase was bombed by the Germans, and airmen and ground crew lost their lives in those attacks, as well as the training accidents. It is possible that the later authors, in attempting to identify a specific accident which spawned this ghost story, are simply picking from the pool of disasters and guessing which one caused the ghost. Right up until the base's final closure in 1952, incoming service personnel received a briefing on the ghosts of Montrose. The most discussed post-war sighting would occur later, in 1963. Though largely unsubstantiated, and recently thoroughly contested by an article appearing in the Journal of the Society of Cyclical Research, this event still continues to capture the public's imagination. This time, Sir Peter Masefield, flying in his personal monoplane near Montrose, suddenly saw the shape of an ancient pre-First World War biplane looming out of the clouds. The plane appeared directly in front of him and at a similar altitude. Macefield, surprised to see such a gorgeous vintage aircraft flying at all, marveled as it began a slow, graceful descent. With rising horror, Macefield saw the old plane's right wing suddenly buckle. The wing collapsed completely and folded into the fuselage, sending the whole wreck hurtling towards the ground. Helpless and shaken, Macefield rushed to land his own little plane nearby and ran to fetch help. Upon finding a group of golfers, they rushed towards where the plane fell, but found no trace of the aircraft or its doomed pilot. Later, when Macefield went to log his flight, he realized the tragic anniversary. The date was May 27th, 1963, exactly 50 years to the day of Lieutenant Arthur's sad demise. While Macefield had the last truly incredible sighting, since the 100th anniversary in 2013, there have been a number of further sightings of a mystery biplane flying low over the skies of Montrose, and of a figure in old aviator gear wandering around the abandoned airfield. Considering the dual tragedies of the two world wars, it is easily possible that Montrose is haunted by not just Desmond Arthur, but by one or more unknown aviators who crashed while training there. The ghosts all seemingly to share a special tie with the long, emptied airstrip. Montrose also continues to be a source of mystery, as its murky past continues to be uncovered. In 2010, it was reported that one of the museum's vintage radios would occasionally be heard playing World War II-era music and even Churchill speeches, even though it was not connected to any power source. Museum staff have reported seeing doorknobs turn when no one is on the other side, and have heard phantom footsteps. Then, in 2017, a Scottish excavation crew rediscovered part of the base's munitions bunker, buried and forgotten after the war. The contractor reported no paranormal sightings, but clearly the old base continues to surprise. Montrose remains one of Great Britain's most haunted places. And if you ever find yourself there, where the River Esk empties into the sea, you might want to keep an eye on the sky, lest you see a lonely biplane, forever doomed to be broken on the hard and unforgiving ground. Thanks again for joining us for this episode. Information about all of our tours and experiences can be found on our website, which is hauntedwalk.com. We'd also love to connect with you on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, all three at Haunted Walk. And if you're enjoying the show, be sure to subscribe so you know when those new episodes are coming out, and we would absolutely love a 5-star rating from you. A special thanks to our Haunted Talks team, including the summer intern, Ezra Badeau, who did most of the research for this episode, Michelle Dennis, our outstanding audio editor, and Kevin MacLeod at Incompetech.com for the additional music. Until we meet again, sweet dreams.